The rumble of the train was a familiar lullaby, a daily rhythm against the backdrop of a city always rushing. I was Eleanor. Just Eleanor to most folks. An elder black woman blending into the morning commute. My hands, calloused from a lifetime of quiet work, held a worn leather bag. My eyes, though lined with age, missed nothing. They never did. That particular morning felt different. A chill bit harder at the platform. The air carried a tension, a whisper of impending chaos. Or maybe that was just me. A lifetime of listening to my gut had taught me its whispers were rarely wrong. I settled into my usual window seat. The city lights were just starting to bleed into a gray dawn. Commuters poured in, a river of tired faces, some already lost in their phones, others staring blankly ahead. A young man, probably in his early 20s, stood too close to my seat. His cologne was overpowering. His laughter, with his friends, was too loud. They were oblivious to anyone but themselves. That was the city. I just wanted my quiet ride, my moment of peace before the day truly began. But peace, like so many things, felt increasingly fragile. The train jolted forward. A woman, sharp-faced and impeccably dressed, pushed her way down the aisle. Her voice cut through the general hum. She was on her phone, speaking with an urgency that made heads turn. "This entire line is a disaster," she declared, not to her phone, but to the entire carriage. Her eyes, cold and dismissive, swept over the diverse faces around her. They lingered on mine a moment too long, a flicker of something I knew all too well. I ignored it. I always did. What good was confrontation? I'd seen too much in my years. Too many battles fought, too many words wasted. Some things were better met with silence, a silent strength that few understood. Then the train unexpectedly screeched to a halt. A sudden lurch, the smell of burning brakes. A collective groan rose from the passengers. People stumbled. Briefcases crashed. A child cried out. It wasn't a hard stop, but it was jarring. The impeccably dressed woman lost her balance. She wobbled, then slammed her shoulder against the young man beside me. He grunted. Her phone clattered to the floor. It skittered under my seat. Her face contorted, not with pain, but with pure, unadulterated fury. She turned, her eyes blazing, not at the young man she'd bumped, but at me, as if my very presence, my quiet stillness, was the cause of her misfortune. "You!" she shrieked. Her voice, sharp and accusatory, pierced the sudden silence in our section of the carriage. "Look what you made me do, sitting there, taking up space. Can't you even move properly?" Her friends, two other women, equally well dressed, had gathered around her. Their expressions mirrored hers. Disdain, impatience, a sense of aggrieved entitlement. One of them pointed a manicured finger at my feet. "Her bag is practically in the aisle," she scoffed, "blocking everything." My bag was neatly tucked against my ankles, out of the way, always. It was an old habit, a courtesy I'd learned long ago. But facts didn't matter in that moment. Not to them. Their anger was a wave, crashing over me. Her phone, still under my seat, seemed to mock the situation. "You old woman!" the first woman snarled, her voice dripping with contempt. "Can't you hear? I need my phone. Move your feet. Get out of the way." She didn't ask. She demanded. Her eyes narrowed, inspecting me as if I were a piece of litter. Always in the way, always causing problems. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. The old woman was a jab at my age. The always in the way was a jab at something deeper. My skin, my presence, my very right to exist in that space. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a familiar, slow burn of indignation. My hands tightened on the strap of my bag. I met her gaze, unflinching. My silence, I knew, only fueled her fire. What? No words? She sneered, leaning closer. Her friends chuckled. Low, mocking sounds. Typical. Can't even string a sentence together. Just sit there and cause trouble. Other passengers were looking now. Some averted their eyes, uncomfortable witnesses. Others stared, morbidly curious. No one spoke up. No one intervened. A common experience. A lonely one. A memory flashed through my mind. Years ago, a younger me on a different train. A similar encounter. A similar injustice. I had spoken then, defended myself. It had changed nothing, only escalated the ugliness. This time I was different, wiser, or perhaps just more weary, but not broken, never broken. I took a slow, deliberate breath. The scent of her expensive perfume, mingled with the train's stale air, filled my nostrils. I could feel my heart thudding a quiet rhythm against my ribs, a rhythm of patience, a rhythm of control. Their words were meant to diminish me, to make me feel small, invisible, but they were failing. Utterly. I felt my gaze sharpen, a quiet fire igniting behind my calm facade. The woman gestured impatiently at the floor. Just hand me my phone, you hear? And next time, try to be less cumbersome. I looked down at her expensive phone, glittering under my seat. Then I looked up at her, really looked at her. Her entitlement, her anger, her absolute certainty that she held the power in this moment. She had no idea, not the slightest inkling. I slowly reached under my seat. My fingers closed around the smooth, cool metal of her phone. I didn't hand it to her immediately. I held it for a moment, my thumb gently tracing its edge. A small, silent gesture, a moment of deliberate pause. The train began to move again. A gentle, almost imperceptible shift. The city outside, still dark, rolled past. My eyes, no longer fixed on her, glanced toward the window. My reflection stared back. An old woman. Yes, but also someone else. Someone she couldn't possibly see. I finally raised my hand, extending the phone. But my gaze was no longer on her furious face. It was on something else. Something unseen, yet undeniably present. A decision had been made. A very quiet, very firm decision. And that decision, I knew, would change everything for her. And for this entire line. Their laughter echoed in the carriage. A jarring, discordant sound. It wasn't merely loud. It felt designed to pierce, to unsettle. Each burst of mirth was a tiny hammer blow against the quiet dignity of the morning. Their words, initially a low rumble, swelled, becoming distinct, pointed. They were dissecting me, my silver hair, the way my sensible coat sat on my shoulders, the careful posture I'd cultivated over a lifetime. My silence, too, became a target. Look at her, one sneered, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of the train. His friends chuckled, a low, guttural sound. Think she owns the place? Another, taller, leaner, chimed in. Too important to even notice us, huh? Too good for us? My hands clasped loosely over my worn leather bag in my lap felt the familiar tremor. It wasn't the trembling of fear, not exactly. It was more like an ancient, weary vibration deep within my bones, a ghost from countless other moments. It was the same tremor I'd felt decades ago, stepping into boardrooms where I was the only black woman, walking into spaces where my very presence was an unspoken question, an anomaly to be scrutinized. This feeling, this slow burn of being an intruder in plain sight, was not new. Being judged before a single word left my lips, before any action could define me. My mother, God rest her soul, used to tell me, Eleanor, hold your head high. You belong in every space your feet touch. Don't let them shrink you. Her words were meant as a shield, a potent one, often, but even the strongest shield could feel heavy under a constant barrage. The young men, emboldened by my lack of visible reaction, grew bolder still. Their comments shifted, sharpened. From my appearance, they moved to my age, to a general, dismissive contempt. Slow down, old timer, one chuckled. A harsh, grating sound. Don't miss your stop. Or maybe you already did and just forgot. The sting was immediate, familiar. The casual dismissal, the easy assumption of my inadequacy. It burrowed under my skin like 1,000 tiny needles, each prick a reminder of similar slights. The patronizing smiles, the voices that spoke slowly, as if I couldn't comprehend. The invisible barriers erected without a word. I kept my gaze fixed on the passing scenery outside the window. The blur of trees, the concrete fences, the quiet awakening of the city. A small, instinctive part of me wanted to shrink, to make myself smaller, to disappear into the upholstery of the seat, to become invisible, as I had learned to do so many times, simply to survive. But another part, a deeper, more resilient part, stirred within me. It was the part that had stood firm through years of unspoken challenges, through overt slights, the part that had faced down subtle discrimination in sterile meeting rooms, in bustling public squares, in polite coded conversations. It was the part that had earned every stripe, every certificate, every hard-won promotion, every ounce of respect through sheer, quiet, often exhausting dedication. I thought of the regulations, the thick, precise manuals I'd helped draft, the strict code of conduct for commuters, designed to ensure safety and comfort for all. The bold signs plastered throughout every station, warning against disruptive behavior, against harassment. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just a personal slight. This was about the sanctity of the public space, the comfort of every passenger, the very order of the transit system I had dedicated over 4 decades of my life to upholding. A woman across the aisle, meticulously organized, clutching her worn leather purse, kept her eyes rigidly fixed on her lap. A young man a few seats down, engrossed in the luminous screen of his phone, stiffened visibly, his shoulders hunched. Their silence was not merely the absence of sound, it was loud with shared apprehension, a silent plea for intervention, for someone, anyone, to stand up. Their averted gazes spoke volumes of their discomfort, their helplessness. It painted a vivid picture of what happens when rules are broken, when decorum crumbles. The lead young man, his eyes alight with a dangerous, reckless confidence, took another step closer. He was almost leaning over my seat now, his bulky form casting a shadow over me, his breath, faintly smelling of something sweet and artificially fruity, reached me, an unwelcome intrusion. "What's the matter, Grandma?" he sneered, his voice dropping slightly, laced with a triumphant malice. "Cat got your tongue. Or are you just deaf? Maybe you need a hearing aid." His face was too close, uncomfortably, aggressively so. His eyes, bright and cruel, searched mine for a reaction, for fear, for submission. He wanted to see me flinch. He wanted to witness my humiliation. That was the line, the precise, irrefutable boundary, the physical intrusion into my personal space, the deliberate, condescending mockery of my age and perceived frailty. It wasn't just verbal abuse now. It was a clear, unambiguous threat, a challenge not just to me, but to the very fabric of civilized public interaction, a challenge to the unspoken contract we all enter when we share a public space. A cold flicker ignited deep within me, not the fiery heat of anger, not the consuming blaze of rage. Something far more potent, something colder, sharper. It was the absolute clarity that comes from long experience, From countless hours spent meticulously dissecting problems, enforcing rules, ensuring safety, the precise, methodical engagement of a well oiled machine finally springing into deliberate action. I had seen this sense of entitlement before. This arrogant belief that some lives mattered less, that some people could be pushed aside, ignored, humiliated without consequence. I had fought it my whole life in countless subtle and overt ways. This was merely another iteration. My mother's voice resonated again, not as a gentle shield, but as a firm, unwavering command. Eleanor, sometimes holding your head high means standing up, not just for yourself, but for what is right, for everyone. My gaze, which had been fixed on the fleeting world beyond the window, slowly, deliberately shifted. I met his eyes directly. There was no fear in mine, only a deep, unyielding calm, a quiet strength that had been forged in the crucible of 1,000 challenges, 1,000 moments of injustice overcome. He paused, a momentary flicker of surprise, of something akin to confusion, crossed his features. Perhaps he expected tears, or a bowed head, a capitulation. He found none of it, only a steady, unwavering presence. The tremor in my hands had completely ceased. My fingers, still clasped together over my bag, felt solid now, firm. I felt the subtle, cool weight of the badge in my inner jacket pocket. It wasn't just a simple piece of metal, it was a symbol, a profound responsibility, a promise to every commuter that their journey would be safe, orderly, and respectful. A promise that applied, especially on my line. This group, with their crude jokes and their arrogant snarls, had not only shattered that promise for everyone in this car, they had done it to me, to the very embodiment of the system they were disrespecting. I took a slow, deep breath. The faint, familiar scent of stale coffee and industrial disinfectant in the air. The rhythmic vibration of the train wheels on the tracks beneath us. All these details suddenly sharpened, becoming acutely present. My mind raced, not with panic, but with procedure, with established protocols, with the precise, measured steps I needed to take, the options available to me, the necessary sequence of actions. The young man's sneer faltered slightly. He sensed a shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the atmosphere. He didn't understand what it was, but I did. I knew exactly what I needed to do, what I had to do, for myself, for the silent, uneasy passengers, for the integrity of the system I had painstakingly built and guarded for so many years. My right hand, steady and purposeful, began to move, slowly, deliberately, towards the inside of my jacket, the place where my authority rested. Their words kept coming, a relentless, ugly wave. They didn't care who heard, didn't care who saw, just louder and louder. Each syllable a tiny cut, not just to me, to everyone who looked away. I felt the familiar ache, a tightness in my chest. It wasn't pain, not really, more like the weight of years. Years of hearing the same tune, different voices, same song, always the same song. It took me back to another time, another train. I was just a girl. Then, barely 18, my first day with the company, a trainee, eager, full of dreams. I wore my crisp new uniform. My grandmother had sewn the buttons on herself. She said it was a symbol of pride, of service. That day, an older man, he sneered at my uniform, at my skin, told me I didn't belong, said I was taking a job from one of his own. His words stung worse than any physical blow. They hollowed me out, made me question everything. I remembered standing there, young, confused. My eyes welled up. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend I wasn't black, wasn't me. But then I saw my reflection in the polished train window. My grandmother's face looked back, her stern, proud eyes. They told me to stand tall, to not let them diminish my spirit. I swallowed hard then, and I reported him. It wasn't easy, but I did it. And that day, I learned something crucial. My uniform wasn't just fabric, it was a shield, a promise, a responsibility to myself, to my community, to justice. Now, decades later, here I sat, the same words, the same sneers, but I wasn't that scared girl anymore. My uniform was different now, not the crisp blue of a trainee, but a quiet authority, not seen, but ever present. I looked at the young people, their faces contorted with hate, so much anger, so little understanding. My gaze swept past them, over the other passengers, the ones pretending not to hear. Their silence was a heavy cloak. It weighed on the air, a different kind of shame. I watched the doors slide open and close, noticed the way the conductor fumbled his announcement, his voice too soft, too distant. I knew this line. Every curve, every stop, every signal. I knew the regulations by heart. I helped write some of them. My eyes landed on the emergency brake, a bright red handle. Simple, direct, but the power behind it, immense. The power to stop everything, the power to halt the journey, to bring the world to a standstill. For a moment, a thought flickered, like a spark. What if? No, not just what if. What must be done? This wasn't just about me. This was about that young girl I once was, about every person who ever rode this line and faced this ugliness, about the silent ones, the ones who couldn't speak up or wouldn't. One of the young men, he took a step closer. His voice dropped, a menacing whisper, but loud enough for me. "You don't deserve to breathe the same air," he hissed. His eyes gleamed with cold malice. That was it. The line crossed. The final stone dropped. The quiet resolve hardened into steel. My chest stopped aching. Instead, a cold calm spread through me. It wasn't anger. Not anymore. It was certainty. I took a slow, deep breath. The smell of stale air, of disinfectant, of 1,000 journeys. I knew exactly what needed to happen, and I knew exactly how to make it happen. My fingers, steady and unhurried, moved towards my purse. Inside, a small, laminated card, a badge. More than just a piece of plastic, it was a key to a different kind of power. My eyes met the young man's. For the first time, I didn't look away. I held his gaze. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He saw something there, something new, something unyielding. He didn't know what it was. Not yet, but he would. Very soon. The train rattled on, towards the next stop, but the journey had already changed. For everyone on board. They just didn't know it yet. My hand closed around the cool, smooth plastic inside my bag. The time for quiet endurance was over. The shouting, it echoed. It vibrated through the carriage, through my bones. Their words, sharp and unwarranted, felt like tiny darts piercing my composure, one by one. I sat there, a statue carved from decades of holding steady, of enduring. My hands, clasped loosely in my lap, were the only things that betrayed the tremor within. My gaze remained fixed out the window, watching the blur of the city lights, the fleeting reflections of a life lived. But I wasn't seeing the city. I was seeing decades. I saw my mother, her back straight, her chin up, walking past sneering faces on the way to work. I saw my father, his hands calloused, his eyes weary, explaining to me why some doors were closed no matter how hard you knocked. I saw myself, a young girl, then a young woman, navigating spaces that constantly questioned my presence, my worth, my right to simply be. Each shout from that group, each laugh at my expense wasn't just about this moment. It was a culmination. It was every whispered slight, every suspicious glance, every time I was made to feel small, invisible, or unwelcome. My chest felt heavy, weighted down by the sheer exhausting familiarity of it all. This wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound, aching weariness, a sadness that settled deep, deep in the marrow of my bones. A young woman across from me, a student perhaps, averted her eyes. She looked uncomfortable, maybe ashamed for not speaking up. I understood. It was easier to look away, to pretend not to see. For so long, I had done the same, picking my battles, preserving my peace. But what peace was this? When my very being was under assault, their voices, now a little softer, still carried the sting of their derision. They spoke of my hair, my clothes, my age. They assumed so much, understood so little. They painted me with a brush of stereotypes, dismissing a lifetime of hard work, of quiet resilience, of dedication. A memory flashed, bright and sharp. My first day as a junior inspector, decades ago. The pride, the fear, the immense responsibility. My supervisor, a kind but stern man, had looked me in the eye and said, Eleanor, this isn't just a job, it's a promise to every commuter that their journey will be safe, respectful, and on time. And if it's not, you make it right. Make it right. The words echoed in my mind, a forgotten mantra suddenly revitalized. I had spent my life making things right, ensuring the trains ran, the signals were clear, the staff was trained, the schedules were met. I had risen through the ranks, not with fanfare, but with quiet competence. I had overseen the implementation of new safety protocols, managed major infrastructure upgrades, navigated complex union negotiations. I was not just on this train. I was a fundamental part of the very system that kept it moving. The realization settled over me, not as a sudden burst of anger, but as a cold, unwavering resolve. This wasn't just about me, Eleanor, the commuter. This was about Eleanor, the senior inspector. This was about the integrity of the system, the respect due to all its passengers, and the fundamental principle of human dignity that their words were so carelessly trampling. My hands unclenched. I felt a renewed strength, a quiet power rising within me. The weariness began to recede, replaced by a clarity of purpose. I wasn't a victim here, not anymore. I was an authority they had not only underestimated but brazenly disrespected. My eyes, still fixed on the outside world, now saw it with different focus. I noted the station we were approaching, the time on the digital display above the door. I noted the small, subtle indicators around me, the ones only someone intimately familiar with the system would pick up. The little red light blinking on the emergency communication panel near the driver's cabin, the slight tremor in the carriage that meant a minor track adjustment was underway. The group continued their low, snide comments. They were laughing now, a little too loud, enjoying their cruel sport. They had no idea the storm they had unknowingly stirred, no idea the meticulous, methodical mind they had just ignited. My mind began to race, not in panic, but in strategic calculation. The protocols, the procedures, the chain of command, how to execute this with precision, with impact, and with an undeniable clarity of justice. This wouldn't be a shouting match. This wouldn't be an argument. This would be an exercise in operational authority. Quiet, undeniable, total. My fingers, no longer trembling, instinctively reached into my oversized tote bag. They brushed past my wallet, my reading glasses, until they found the familiar, cool, metallic weight I was seeking. My badge, my official identification. It felt heavier than usual today, charged. I didn't pull it out yet. Not time. I let my fingers rest on it, feeling its smooth surface. A silent promise, a quiet declaration. The journey was about to change for everyone, and for them, the change would be sudden, profound, and entirely of their own making. The train slowed, approaching the next stop. A moment, a pause. The world outside, still oblivious to the seismic shift happening inside me. The stage was set, the pieces were moving, and I, the elder underestimated woman, was about to conduct the entire symphony. The words hung in the air, thick with their venom. Useless old hag, he'd sneered, his friend cackling beside him. My breath hitched, not from fear, but from a familiar ache that had been stirring within me since the first insulting remark. It was a dull throb, a deep-seated burn that had flared countless times throughout my life. A woman, a black woman, existing in public space, always under scrutiny, always a target. The weariness of it, the constant battle against casual disrespect pressed down on me. I felt the eyes of other passengers on me, a multitude of gazes, each telling its own silent story. A young woman across the aisle, clutching her oversized purse, kept glancing my way. Her brow was deeply furrowed in a mixture of sympathy and anxiety, her lips pressed into a tight, thin line. A middle-aged man buried his face deeper into his newspaper, the crinkle of pages a flimsy shield against the uncomfortable reality unfolding before him. Others simply stared out the window, their reflections a blurry tapestry of averted eyes. No one spoke. No one truly intervened. They never truly did. Not until it was too late, or until someone else decided to act. The burden, I knew, was always mine to bear or to fight. My mind, despite the immediacy of the insults, drifted back to a different train, a different time. A bus, really, on a sweltering summer day. I was a girl then, barely out of school, clutching my worn textbooks. A white woman, her face pinched with entitlement, had demanded my seat. "You people," she'd said, just like that, her voice dripping with contempt. "You people always think you own everything. Get up." I remembered the immediate flush of heat in my cheeks, the shame of being so small, so utterly powerless against such casual cruelty. I'd given up my seat then, retreating to the back, my eyes stinging. My mother had always taught me to pick my battles, to swallow the indignity for a greater peace. But the sting of that particular defeat, the profound injustice of being diminished simply for existing, had never truly left me. It had fueled something deep inside, a quiet, unyielding resolve to ensure that one day I would not be powerless. I would not just endure. And here I was, decades later, on a modern, climate-controlled train, facing the same old tune, just with a different arrangement of words and faces. The boy, emboldened by my silence, his bravado swelling with each passing moment, pushed further. "What? You deaf now, Grandma? Can't even hear when someone's talking to you? Maybe you should stay home with your cats." His friend snickered, loud and obnoxious, a grating sound that echoed in the relatively quiet carriage. The sound bounced off the windows, turning heads further down the aisle, but still, no one spoke up. Their inaction felt like another layer of the assault, not just against me, but against the very idea of common decency. The injustice wasn't just in their crude words, it was in the crushing silence of the others, the quiet complicity that allows such venom to fester and spread, the palpable fear of stepping in, of disrupting the delicate social balance. It was a heavy cloak I had worn so many times, a weight I had learned to carry with a stoic grace. But not today. Today felt different. My heart, usually so resilient, so practiced in its ability to absorb and deflect, felt a new kind of tired. a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that demanded an end, not just another quiet endurance. This was not a battle I was willing to simply swallow anymore. My fingers, gnarled with the beautiful artistry of age and hard work, tightened imperceptibly around the strap of my well-worn practical handbag. Inside, nestled amongst my essentials, a worn leather wallet, a tube of soothing lip balm, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, was the small laminated card, the one that spoke volumes without uttering a single word, the one that gave me not just a voice, but an undeniable authority. I had kept it hidden, not out of secrecy, but out of a deep understanding of human nature. People see an elderly black woman. They see a certain set of assumptions. They see frailty, a grandmotherly figure, perhaps someone easily dismissed. They don't see a dedicated professional, a meticulous guardian of the city's complex veins of transportation, an inspector with decades of invaluable experience and a sharp mind. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, breathing in the subtly metallic stale air of the train carriage. I remembered the solemn oath I took so long ago, the immense responsibilities entrusted to me. My role wasn't just about safety regulations and adherence to schedules. It was about ensuring respect, order, and dignity for all who rode these vital lines. It was about making sure the system worked, not just mechanically, but socially and equitably. And that meant addressing those who sought to disrupt it, not just with technical infractions, but with egregious breaches of human decency. This was no longer just about me, Eleanor Vance, the commuter. This was about Eleanor Vance, the senior transportation inspector. When I opened my eyes, the world outside the window was a blur of grey concrete, passing industrial buildings, and the fleeting glimpse of other stations. My destination station wasn't for another few stops, but their stop, the one for their tirade, for their hateful display, was long overdue. My gaze, steady and unflinching, met the eyes of the young man who had initiated the abuse. His smirk, so confidently fixed moments before, faltered now, dissolving into a flicker of confusion, perhaps even a nascent unease. He didn't know what he was seeing. He saw an old woman, perhaps tired, perhaps hurt, certainly an easy target. He didn't see the woman who had overseen countless intricate safety audits, who had designed innovative new routing systems to improve efficiency, who commanded the quiet respect of every driver, conductor, and station manager across these entire lines. He saw a stereotype. I saw a violation. A quiet, profound calm settled over me then. It was the kind of calm that comes before a storm, or perhaps more accurately, before a decisive act of justice. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't descend to their vulgar level. My power lay not in volume, but in procedure, in the immutable rules they so carelessly trampled upon, in the authority they so foolishly underestimated. I reached slowly into my bag, my movements deliberate, unhurried, each gesture imbued with a quiet purpose. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth plastic of the laminated ID card. The small official badge was there too, tucked securely in its dedicated pocket within the inner lining. My hand closed around them both, a silent, firm grip. I wasn't reaching for my phone to record them, or for a handkerchief to dab away a tear, as they might have expected. I was reaching for the instruments of my office, the instruments of my truth. The train rumbled on, a vast, indifferent metal beast, oblivious to the small, tense drama unfolding within its belly. The young men, perhaps sensing my subtle shift in demeanor, or perhaps just running out of steam in their cruel sport, had quieted down slightly, though their sneers remained, etched on their faces like ugly masks. They watched me, expectant, perhaps hoping for a final, breaking reaction, a tear, a plea for mercy. They would get a reaction, all right, just not the one their limited imaginations could ever anticipate. I felt a small, almost imperceptible smile tug at the very corner of my lips, a private, knowing smile that only I understood. It wasn't a smile of malice or of petty revenge, but of quiet determination, a smile that understood the gravity of the moment and the simple, undeniable truth of what was about to happen. The train slowed slightly, its brakes hissing softly as it began its approach to the next station. This was it. The time had come for me to stand up, not just for myself, but for every you people who had ever been silenced, dismissed, and disrespected. My hand emerged from the bag, not empty. My eyes were fixed firmly on the lead young man, whose smirk was now completely gone, replaced by a wide-eyed, dawning flicker of genuine confusion, then perhaps alarm. He finally saw something he hadn't expected. My quiet resolve hardened into something unbreakable. I felt a power rise within me, not of anger, but of duty. I looked at the young woman again. She was still sneering. Her friends were still laughing. They had no idea. I reached into my worn coat pocket. My fingers closed around the cold, smooth metal of my badge. The silver glinted faintly under the flickering train lights. I pulled it out. I held it up. My arm was steady. My voice was calm. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I stated. Every word was precise. "Chief Transportation Safety Inspector." The laughter died. The young woman's smirk faltered. Her eyes, once so dismissive, widened in shock. Her friends stared, their faces suddenly blank. A ripple of murmurs spread through the carriage. Other passengers leaned forward, trying to understand. I ignored them. I lifted my hand to my ear. I spoke into the tiny, almost invisible earpiece. My tone shifted. It became crisp, authoritative. "This is Inspector Vance. I am on train 412 inbound. Southbound track." There was a crackle of static, then a familiar voice in my ear. "Copy, Inspector Vance. What's your status?" I didn't hesitate. My gaze swept over the group of young people who had made this journey a nightmare. "I am requesting an immediate, system-wide shutdown of the entire Green Line." A sharp gasp came from a woman seated nearby. The conductor, who had been alerted by the commotion and was just reaching our carriage, froze. He saw my badge. His jaw dropped. His face went stark white. He knew what that meant. He knew who I was. The weight of my words hung in the air. I understood the chaos this decision would unleash. Thousands of commuters would be delayed, appointments missed, businesses affected. But some lessons, I thought, needed to be taught on a grand scale. Some lines needed to be drawn with an unwavering hand. "This train, number 412, represents a significant safety hazard," I continued, my voice firm, for the benefit of anyone listening. My eyes met the young woman's. "A profound safety hazard," she stammered. Her composure crumbled. You can't do that! Who are you?" Her voice was thin, desperate. My response wasn't for them. It was for every elder disrespected, every black face dismissed. It was for dignity. It was for justice. In my ear, I heard the confirmation. "Affirmative, Inspector Vance. Green Line shutdown initiated. ETA 5 minutes to full stoppage." The train began to slow, not at a station platform, just in the middle of the tracks. The rumble beneath us softened. The overhead lights flickered once, then dimmed slightly. A sudden, hushed silence fell over the entire carriage. Passengers exchanged bewildered glances. "All passengers on this train will be disembarked at the next available safe point," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. "The Green Line is now closed until further notice." The young woman looked around frantically, as if suddenly realizing she was trapped. Her friends were no longer laughing. Their faces, once filled with arrogant amusement, were now etched with disbelief, then dawning fear. They had dismissed me as just an old woman, They were so wrong. The conductor, now recovering, was already speaking rapidly into his radio, his voice strained. Control, this is train 412. Copy that. Inspector Vance is on board. We are slowing to a stop. I watched their faces. The last vestiges of their arrogance melted away, replaced by a cold, hard understanding of consequence. It was a small victory, yes, but it was a start. The train had fully stopped now. The doors remained stubbornly shut. The silence in the carriage was deafening. The real work was just beginning. The train cars stood still. A silence, heavy and profound, had fallen over the station. It was a silence I had commanded, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The initial chaos had subsided. The frantic calls, the bewildered passengers, the urgent arrival of first responders and senior transport officials. They moved around me, a whirlwind of clipboards and hushed conversations. But my gaze remained steady, my resolve unbroken. I watched as the young man, his face now drained of all bravado, was led away. His friends, too, their earlier sneers replaced by fear and confusion. No triumphant feeling swelled in my chest, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. Justice, in its own slow, grinding way, was beginning to move. Hours melted into a blur of interviews, statements taken, reports filed. I explained my actions calmly, factually, the sequence of events, the verbal abuse, the safety protocols violated, the systemic issue of disrespect that festered on our lines. They asked if I truly understood the magnitude of what I had done, the economic impact, the thousands of commuters stranded, the disruption to the city's pulse. I understand it perfectly, I told them. My voice, though weary, carried the weight of decades. I understand what happens when small injustices are allowed to fester. They grow, they become acceptable, until one day they shut down more than just a train line. They shut down a piece of our humanity. My superintendent, a younger man named David, looked at me with a mix of awe and trepidation. He had been my junior once. He knew my work ethic. He knew I didn't act without cause. But this, he admitted, was unprecedented. Mrs. Evans, he began, his voice lowered. The board is divided. Some are praising your courage. Others are furious about the fallout. I simply nodded. Such divisions were predictable. To stand for what is right often means to disrupt the comfortable status quo. The news had spread like wildfire. Social media was alight. My name, once just a badge number, was now everywhere. Elderly black woman shuts down. Train line after racist abuse. The headlines varied, but the core story resonated. I saw the comments. A torrent of support. People sharing their own experiences of disrespect, of being overlooked, of enduring silent slights. They saw themselves in me. And then, the inevitable backlash. Accusations of overreach, of abusing power, of being too sensitive. The words no longer stung. They were familiar refrains from a long, arduous song. I had heard them all my life. They were the background noise of systemic indifference. What truly mattered were the messages from the silent ones, the bus drivers, the ticket agents, the cleaners, the everyday heroes of the transit system. They called me, they messaged me, not with praise, but with understanding. Someone finally did it, Mrs. Evans. Their words were a balm, a testament to a shared burden. That evening, I finally went home. The apartment felt strangely quiet. My phone buzzed incessantly, but I ignored it. I needed to reconnect with the silence, the one before the storm, the one inside myself. I sat in my favorite armchair, staring out the window at the city lights. Each light, a life. Each life, a story. So many stories untold. So many voices unheard. My mother's face came to mind, her stories of segregated buses, of having to stand, even when seats were empty, of the quiet indignities she endured. So I wouldn't have to. She never raised her voice in anger. She taught me to find strength in dignity, in unwavering purpose. But sometimes, purpose demanded a voice, a loud one that reverberated through metal and concrete, one that stopped an entire city in its tracks. I thought about the young man again, his entitlement, his casual cruelty. It wasn't just about him, it was about the fertile ground that nurtured such behavior, the belief that some lives mattered less, that some people were simply there to be stepped on. My action on the train was not just about correcting one injustice, it was about demanding accountability from the system itself, from the very fabric of our public spaces, spaces that should be safe and respectful for everyone. The coming days I knew would be difficult. There would be investigations, hearings. The public spotlight would intensify. But I felt ready, more than ready. I felt a clarity of purpose that had been sharpened by a lifetime of observation. My phone rang again. This time I looked at the caller ID. It was Maria, my closest friend, a retired teacher. She knew me better than anyone. "Eleanor," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Are you all right?" "I am, Maria," I replied. "I truly am." "They're calling you a hero," she continued, "and a troublemaker. Which one do you feel like?" I paused, considering. "Neither, perhaps," I said finally. "I just feel like someone who finally had enough." "And what happens now?" she asked. "After the dust settles?" "Now," I said, looking out at the glittering, indifferent city. "We make sure the dust never settles again on the same old lies. We make sure this city remembers. And we make sure something changes." A heavy sigh escaped me. The day had taken its toll. But deep within, a quiet resolve burned brighter than ever. I had pushed the first domino. Now, I had to be prepared for the avalanche. The next morning, the call came. A summons to the Transit Authority Board. A formal review. The biggest one of my career. My future, and perhaps the future of how our city dealt with such incidents, would be decided there. I knew what I had to say. I knew what I had to demand. The true work was only just beginning. The badge gleamed under the train's harsh fluorescent light. A simple piece of metal, yet it felt like a shield, a hammer. The young man's face, so full of bluster moments before, crumpled. His girlfriend, equally loud, stared as if she'd seen a ghost. The laughter and sneers died, replaced by a stunned silence that spread through the carriage. "You heard me," I said, my voice low, but carrying across the sudden quiet. "This train, this line, it's compromised." I moved past them, towards the intercom panel, ignoring their stammered apologies and protests that now sounded like pathetic whimpers. My fingers, accustomed to the smooth, cool surface of the control panel, pressed the designated sequence. A soft click echoed, then the familiar squelch of the radio connecting. "Central Command," I stated clearly, my voice even. "This is Inspector Davis. Situation critical on the westbound express, line 3. Immediate shutdown required. All traffic on this line to cease operations until further notice." A pause on the other end. Then a voice, surprised. "Inspector Davis, are you safe? What's happened?" "I am safe," I confirmed, looking back at the now pale faces of the couple, their mouths agape. "However, the integrity of passenger experience and safety has been severely breached. I am initiating an immediate full-line operational halt, effective immediately. Secure the next station platform. Send security personnel. We have a public disturbance and a serious breach of conduct investigation to initiate." The silence in the carriage was absolute now. Other passengers, who had been too afraid or too indifferent to intervene before, now shifted in their seats. Some looked confused, others wary. A few even showed a flicker of understanding, perhaps even admiration. The radio crackled back. Understood, Inspector. Initiating full shutdown procedures now. Estimated delay for other trains is significant. Confirm your location for security deployment. I gave the details, my eyes never leaving the couple who had so carelessly stripped me of my peace. They were whispering frantically to each other, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning horror. They had wanted to make a scene. They had succeeded, just not in the way they intended. I pressed the intercom button for the general announcement. My voice, amplified, filled the train. Attention, passengers. This is Inspector Davis. Due to an unforeseen operational incident requiring immediate investigation, this train, and indeed the entire Line 3, is now out of service. All passengers are required to disembark at the next scheduled stop. Security personnel will be present to assist with directions and further information. We apologize for the inconvenience. A murmur rippled through the car. Annoyance, confusion. But for the first time that day, I felt a strange sense of calm. The power of the system, the very system they had scoffed at, was now being wielded. Not with anger, but with precision, with authority. The train slowed, the brakes hissing. We pulled into a station, the platform already bustling with the unexpected arrival. As the doors opened, the faces of waiting passengers reflected their surprise. On the platform, I could see two uniformed security officers, their expressions alert, scanning the disembarking crowd. I stepped off the train, my gaze fixed on the young man and woman who followed, looking lost and bewildered in the sea of annoyed commuters. They were still whispering, their bravado completely gone. "You two," I called out, my voice cutting through the platform noise. "And you, young man, with the phone." I pointed to the one who had filmed. "Security will want a word with you, and rest assured, this investigation will be thorough." Their faces went white. The two security officers immediately moved towards them, their presence imposing. The young man with the phone fumbled it, almost dropping it. I watched as the officers began to question them, their voices firm. The couple looked like children caught stealing candy, not the emboldened bullies they had been minutes ago. The train doors hissed shut behind me. The conductor, looking bewildered, approached me. "Inspector Davis, are you all right?" "I'm fine, conductor. Just ensure the train is secured. We have a lot of work ahead of us." I turned, leaving the chaos I had orchestrated, walking towards the station office. My steps were steady. The train line was shut down. Thousands of people would be delayed. Schedules would be thrown into disarray, but the message would be clear. Some lines, once crossed, could not simply be ignored. Not on my watch, not anymore. The weight of the day settled on me, not as a burden, but as a quiet resolve. This was just the beginning of what needed to be done.